What would you do if your husband called you old and boring every day? If your own son told you he wished another woman was his mom? For 10 years, Rachel gave everything to her family, only to be shoved aside, insulted, and ignored. She cooked, cleaned, gave up her career, and in return, betrayal. But one night, Rachel did something she'd never done before. She finally walked away. This is a story about heartbreak, courage, and second chances, about finding yourself again when everyone else tells you you're worthless. Stay tuned, because you're about to hear how Rachel left behind a loveless marriage and built a new life filled with hope. Eric and I had been married for 10 years. He said I was becoming old, losing my charm, and being uninteresting virtually all the time. Every night, Eric would come home smelling like booze, and I would try to help him, but he would shove me away and yell, "Don't touch me! Go back to your room!" Eric's mom, who lived with us, would cry from the toilet in an agitated voice, "Rachel, why is there?" My 7-year-old son Mike tripped over his toy car and fell to the ground, weeping and rolling about. I stood there watching the toy car while cursing it and saying, "I'm gonna smash it." I saw mayhem happen in my home, and for the first time, I felt absolutely hopeless. I didn't inform David before I went. I never told anyone that I hated my spouse, felt repulsed by my son, and always fought with my mother-in-law. David was my neighbor and childhood friend, much like in books. I never fell in love with David when we were kids. I ended up marrying Eric, a man I met much later, but this was real, not as in books. Life point. 10 years of marriage to Eric, and what I thought was deep, young love had turned into mutual respect. I was angry when I suddenly felt a warm touch on my shoulder. It was David, attractive and appealing, but I knew he was rebellious at heart, even though he looked polished. He told me how he felt about me in college, but I turned him down since I had fallen in love with Eric at first sight. David didn't pull away from me. In fact, after I married Eric, he was the only friend I had left. David worked abroad for 7 years, and he finally came back a few years ago. He always tried to soothe me, to cheer me up, but he knew where the line was and never passed it with a half. He smiled and asked what was wrong, but I was too terrified to leave. I knew him well enough to know that if I answered no, he would have left. Head turned straight around and sent me back, but I had to go. If I stayed in that place any longer, I was going to lose my. That night when I decided to leave was just another normal night, but for some reason that night I finally felt the need to run away from the life that had kept me bound for 10 years. That night, Eric arrived home like he always did, stinking of alcohol that I tried to approach close to him, and on instinct he jumped up, furrowing his brow. "Get away from me. You smell like grease." I pulled off my apron to put up his suit jacket, but he pushed me aside and told me to go back. "I froze in your kitchen." This was it. Everything I had given to this family over the past 10 years, and this was the respect I received back. My mother-in-law, Susan, who had always lived with us, yelled from the bathroom, "Rachel, why isn't there any toilet paper?" My son tripped and fell while playing with his toy cars, and now he's sobbing and rolling around on the floor. "Damn toy vehicle, I'm going to break you." I didn't hurry to aid him with tears, and he screamed at me, "You're a bad mom, I don't want you, my son." With snot all over his face, had caught up his father's attitude. He regarded me the same way Eric did, so I dropped my hands and calmly observed I felt completely helpless all of a sudden. Eric stepped out of the master bathroom and spotted me standing there. I snapped out of it when someone coldly inquired if dinner was ready. I helped Mike up and hurriedly got a new roll of toilet paper from Susan's voice came through the utility room again. "You're so bad at doing chores. I really don't know what Eric sees in you." I rarely retorted, but I couldn't take it anymore. "Then why don't you tell your son should divorce me and marry someone who can do better?" To my astonishment, Susan remained mute for a moment. I didn't wait for her to respond, I just turned and went away. Eric saw it. Something was off with me and furrowed his brows. "What's your problem and where's my chicken nuggets?" I glanced at him. Susan walked out of the restroom and pointed at me, yelling, "Rachel, you can serve yourself rudely in the kitchen. You've gotten bold, my son works his ass off every day, and you simply sit at home taking care of the kids, and you can't even make him a basic dinner." My son covered him in from his My mom often lies around the house and still criticizes me. Food looked up from his plate and sneered at me. Your friend's mom is so gorgeous. You're just an ugly monster. I want Annie to be my mom because she's so nice and pretty. EQ was Mike's art instructor. I had met her a few times. She was kind and young. Mike had told me many times that he wanted Annie to be his mom, so I believed it was simply a child's harmless fantasy. But it turned out he really hated me. I looked at Mike this time and stayed very calm and said, "If you like her so much, let her be your mom," Mike said quietly. He froze and looked at his Eric, smashed his fork on the table, and raised his voice when his father didn't know what to do. "What are you talking about, Rachel? Mike is only a kid. What does he know? He's your son, and you'll always be his mom." Susan threw me a look, but she did what Arik instructed and walked to the kitchen. Dinner was as silent as normal. Everyone was eating in their own world, and the only noise came from Mike, who was having trouble biting into a chicken wing. After that, he pouted, looked at me, and pleaded, "Mom, help me tear the chicken wing." Mike was 7, but he still acted like a 3-year-old who can't accomplish anything without asking for help. If this had happened earlier, I would have cheerfully done it. I used to put him as the center of my life, but now he made me angry, and he even shattered my heart. After a moment of doubt, I stretched out to aid him, but Mike jerked away. "I'm annoyed that you're taking so long. I want Annie to help me instead," so I put my bowl down and let my anger grow. Eric stared at me, then at Mike, and finally at Grandma. "It's okay, Mom. Let Grandma help you tear it up," Susan said. Refuse Eric's request, knowing she relied on her son for everything that I rubbed my temples. Feeling utterly exhausted that I performed most of the chores every day. I know Eric was exhausted from work, but I wasn't exactly idle either. If I complained about the little things that needed to be done around the house, they would think I was simply whining. But the fact was, before I was married and pregnant, I made more money than he did. After that, everyone around me required I take up the duty of the family. Everything had to revolve on the kids and my spouse, and I left my career to stay home and take care of children. But what did I get? In exchange, a husband who believed I was too old and instructed me to stay in the kitchen to a mother-in-law who thought I was useless. Only spending her son's money had a son who didn't like me and wanted someone else to be his mother. He had forgotten who fought and toiled to bring him into this world. That night, he was just as selfish as his father. I didn't eat supper for the first time. I left early, and Eric came back to the room, looked at me with disdain, and said, "I really don't get what you're upset about. Mike is just a kid." I couldn't help but chuckle cruelly at Eric. Do you think I'm annoyed at him just because of Eric's face? Darkness. What did I do now? I'm extremely weary every day. Can you stop being? I looked at his familiar face, but all I felt was distance, Eric. You hate that I stay home, don't you? But don't forget that you were the one who begged me to stay home and give you money to start. Eric looked at me anxiously and said, "Your company came from my and my parents' savings. Haven't forgotten I didn't hate you. That I let out a frigid laugh, is that so, Eric?" He looked at me for a second, and I could see a tinge of shame in his eyes. He grabbed a pillow and said, "I'll sleep in the other room." I gazed at the door as it closed, feeling sick and like I was going to suffocate. I stepped out of the room and the clutter was everywhere. Filthy dishes heaped up on the dining table, leftover meals on the floor, and the living room was full of toys and mess on my side, so I started to clean up. By the time I was done, it was already 1 a.m. That night, I did something I'd never done before. I called David and told him I needed to talk to someone. My family looked beautiful on the outside, but no one really cared about me. David knew me well. He knew that when I called him, it indicated I was hurt and that I had complained previously. Then I was glad because I loved them and wanted to take care of them because they were the ones I loved, but they never seemed to love me back. They took everything I did for granted. He didn't ask why, he just asked. David's words brought me back to Rachel. She asked whether I wanted to go overseas to clear my mind, and I said yes. The present, I looked up at him, smiled slightly, and said, "No leave and leave before we boarded the plane. No one called me." David took my hand and said, "You wanted to relax, so don't think about them." I looked at David's face, and then I knew I might be selfish for not loving him, but I was using him and his affection to attempt to get what I wanted. Wash away the pain my family caused me when I weakly asked David if he would hate me. David's hold got tighter for AR. He smiled again after a time and said, "I'm glad you thought of me first. I'm glad you called it." We spent 3 weeks in Sri Lanka. And in those 3 days, I didn't worry about Eric or anyone else. I was so calm, honestly at ease. I hadn't felt like we started in Colombo, the capital, and then went to Damola, Kandiyallagal, and back. As soon as we stepped off the airport at Colombo on the first day, residents put on a sweets and dance show for us. David and I went to a fish market, where we saw a traditional dance that is done at weddings, festivals, and for important guests. Arrived at the elephant orphanage, we sat by the river eating curry rice while watching elephants swim and bathe. Their innocence was a little balm to my soul. We also went to the dam, a cave temple where Exquisite lived. We finally went hiking on Horton Plains, where there are 2-year-old murals and statues. People called it the end of the world because it was so peaceful. The only sounds were the wind, birds, and sometimes peacocks. Dear DT 5 in the morning. We went through thick trees and didn't see any leopards, although we saw crocodiles, rhinoceros, monkeys, and all types of birds, while I stood in the wind looking at the clear blue sky and white clouds. It was then that I really understood the meaning of, from now on, the world is before me, which points me to wherever I want to go. David stood at the edge of a cliff and suddenly yelled, "Rachel, you have to be happy." I watched his profile for the first time. My eyes ached with emotion. I blinked, then shouted back, "David, so do you 3 weeks passed swiftly and I have to go back to the sad days that would come when we broke up?" David grasped my hand and said, "Rachel, if you're sad, come find me. I'll always be here for you." I raced into his arms and tears fell from my eyes. Uncontrollably, when I got home, I dropped my suitcase and decided to finally have a serious conversation with Eric. Those days in Sri Lanka had given me a lot of time to reflect, and I came to numerous realizations that I couldn't stay at. I couldn't stay home as a housewife forever. I needed to work because I had my own dreams and worth. I cleaned the house again, and as I was cleaning the door, Eric came in. He was holding Mike's hand and smiling widely when he saw me. Froze. His voice dropped, "And you really came back." Mike ran over and pushed me. "Why did you come back?" "I hope Mom would never come back." I paused what I was doing, grabbed Mike's hand, and whispered with a smile, "Mike, don't be so rude in your do." And no matter what Mike said, he was still my child. I shouldn't have to. But if Mom and Dad get divorced, I can have Annie Auntie as my mom before I complete Mike. Eric grabbed me and said something that astonished me. In Mike's eyes, I wasn't even worthy of being his mom. Mike instructed Mike to get inside right away. I sat down on the couch feeling quite angry that I thought I could do it. I still wanted to preserve this family, but I was simply dreaming that I wrinkled my nose and spoke without thinking. Eric. Eric paused for a moment before saying, "Your cologne is really strong." Maybe I accidentally got my assistant scent on me that I laughed coldly in my mind, really, but it smells just like the Annie's fragrance smells lovely and unusual, and I remembered that smell from the first time I met her. "Well," Eric frowned, "you're overthinking it." That I didn't answer, just gave a weak smile. "Rachel, where did you go with David?" This time I looked up, absolutely shocked that Eric even knew where I was. I assumed he didn't care at all about what I did, but he was picking on me again with David. I shook my head and said, "Eric, David's been a..." Eric snorted. "Longtime friend of mine, I don't like him, and my relationship with him is purely platonic." "You've been with him. What did you two do? Do close friends disappear for 3 weeks? We never crossed any lines. I wasn't feeling well these days, and he's the only friend I have in this city. He took me out to get some air." I could feel my anger growing over the 10 years of our marriage. I was concerned Eric would feel envious if I spent too much time alone with David, so I didn't see him very often. In person, and most of our communication was by phone. David even went abroad for 7 years because of my marriage. I told Eric this over and over again, but he never believed me. This was the only occasion in the prior 10 years that I went. I went out with David alone, and we didn't do anything. What right did Eric have to condemn me? He was the one who. Eric snarled, You think I'll believe that we stood by our marriage first?" It was a tie until the door opened again. Susan strolled in with a young woman, and that woman was none. Annie Susan glared at me. "What are you two AR?" She was the only person Mike had been dreaming of as his new mother. "I could hear you two arguing outside." Annie was wearing a white shirt and looked quite nice. She had a Rachel greeted me with a graceful gaze, a pleasant voice, and a little smile. I looked at her and saw that she was the necklace she was wearing. It was from my favorite brand. Luckily, I had spotted it in Eric's. It wasn't meant for me after all. Mike heard the noise and pushed the door open right away. Gayton came out. "Aunt Annie, you're so slow. Why are you only coming back now?" Annie lovingly massaged Mike's head, demonstrating sympathy. "Did you have fun at the amusement park?" I looked up surprised, and I stared at Eric. Did they really go to the amusement park together? I had been wondering why Eric was so happy and bright. Today I found out that he had met someone he liked. Eric didn't even look at me. His eyes were completely focused on Annie. It eventually hit me without my recognizing they had become a true family, and I had become I didn't say anything else to the stranger. I just collected my still-packed luggage and went to my room, where I was glad that the first thing I did when I got home was clean the house instead of unpacking my clothing, which I couldn't stand. To stay here any longer when Eric saw me dragging my suitcase. He even laughed. "Rachel, what are you throwing another fit about? Are you going to look for David again?" I looked at him and said, "What's wrong?" "Wrong with departing, interrupt your happy family." Annie glanced at Eric, then spoke. "Rachel, did you misunderstand something? I snored you're wearing a necklace my spouse bought, and you say I got it wrong." Eric yelled angrily, "Rachel, I didn't." I couldn't believe it when Eric said, "You went out with another man and didn't say anything. What gives you the right to be upset?" "So simply because I'm married, I can't have any male friends, and nothing happened between us?" David and I asked Eric why he kept calling me names like this, but I didn't want to anymore. I couldn't explain anything to him anymore because he wouldn't believe me. "Fine, Eric, if you want it that way." Eric didn't expect me to say the word divorce, and his countenance went dark right away after a pause. Rachel stared at me coldly and said, "Don't regret this." I grinned and felt strangely comforted. I made an appointment with a lawyer for tomorrow. When I looked at Mike, he was scared I would take him with me and hid. I smiled at Mike behind Annie and said, "Don't worry, I'm not going to do that anymore." "Your mom, Dee." I turned my attention to Annie. She looked away, her eyes full of remorse, but I didn't really care. Liaison between her and Eric anymore? Annie congratulated Susan, who didn't seem to believe I would actually divorce. Eric said something before closing the door. "Eric, don't worry, Rachel won't dare to divorce you. He's just a useless woman. Who would want her?" I didn't hear Eric's answer, but I was sure he felt I would never go through with it. I was serious when I grabbed my suitcase and went to the hotel. I didn't even take off my shoes. Flopped onto the bed for the first time in years, I enjoyed a good night's sleep. I didn't have to worry about my son or fear making a mistake that would anger them all. When I woke up, it was already dawn. David had called me many. I phoned him back a few times, and the phone connected immediately. To my amazement, it was a child's voice on the hay. "Is there something you need from my dad?" "Wait, my dad. When did you say David got married? Why hadn't I known at the cafe?" David stepped in, clutching a child's hand at. He smiled and said, "Rachel, have you been waiting long?" I smiled and glanced at them, not for long. "Hey, here is my kid, Jerry." "Jerry, this is Rachel Auntie Jerry, about the same age as Mike, but he was much cuter. He was polite, always giving me sweet smiles as if he really liked me." I looked at David and still felt a little confused, but I didn't want to ask because this was David's private business. However, David spoke up on his own. "Rachel, this is my adoptive child that I nearly spit out the water I was sipping at." His David looked at me seriously and then smiled when I asked him what words he wanted. "My dad always wanted me to have a child, but I didn't want to get married." I coughed twice, but your dad didn't get it. "Upset when you adopted a child? Don't worry, Jerry's so adorable that my dad keeps Jerry." Raised his hand and said, "Please take me home." "Rachel Auntie, don't worry. Grandpa likes me a much." I couldn't help but smile at Jerry. He was so cute. Then my phone rang. Was Eric? David glanced at me but didn't say anything. That I answered the phone. Is there something you need? Eric /S voice was a touch gruff. Where's the black tie in the first? I didn't bother to hide how chilly my voice was when you contacted me only for this. There was a long stillness before Eric spoke again. Wait, where's Mike's water bottle? I furrowed my brow. Rachel, don't forget that we're not divorced yet. His voice got louder. Don't ask me who to ask. Thanks for the reminder that we're not divorced. Eric's tone changed in a strange way to be more joyful. That's fine as long as you know that I could almost see Eric's face when he said, I know I'll see you at the lawyer's office this afternoon. On the other end, his free babysitter was finally dashing off, and I was sure he was furious because, as expected, Eric's Rachel, are you really going to divorce me? Eric, don't forget that you agreed to it yesterday. What? About your precious son, you don't care anymore. Mike crushed my heart. Sometimes I thought I would be better off without him. I said coldly. I don't want Mike either. Hune's all yours. Don't worry, I have no regrets. That I could hear Eric's hard breathing before he quickly hung up the phone that I put. I put my phone back in my bag and looked up to see David and Jerry staring at me. I froze for a second. Jerry walked over and hugged me and said, Don't be sad, Rachel Auntie. It will be your son from now on. I looked at David and felt a little dazed. David smiled at me. Don't get me wrong, I took Jerry in my arms, and for some reason I felt tears welling up in my eyes later. I simply wanted to console you. Jerry was sent home. David and I strolled down the street. He questioned, Are you really going through with the divorce? I nodded yes, and I've already moved out. I don't want anything except for what's. David stopped walking and turned to me with a serious look on his face. Did Eric cheat on you? I caught his stare and responded calmly that doesn't matter, that I just can't live like this anymore. Eric, Mike, Susan in that place, where practically everyone took my sacrifices for granted, made me cry. I didn't mean to, but I forgot what it was like to be myself. David pulled me. Don't worry, I support you. I spent the whole afternoon waiting at the lawyer's office for the backlash. Eric never showed up, so I had to call him again. As soon as the phone rang, I said, Eric, where are you? Sorry, Rachel, Eric is still at work. Annie answered the phone. I waited for a second, then added, Let him pick up the phone, but I just told you he's working. Annie said, but I couldn't help but get angry when I shouted, Let him pick up. There was stillness on the other end until Eric's agitated. Rachel, are you done with your tantrum? Eric, I've been waiting for you all afternoon. I am not as free as you. The divorce papers will come from my lawyer, I stated forcefully. Tomorrow is the deadline. Eric's voice was full with rage. Are you really that impatient? We'll come to your office tomorrow without waiting for a call. Response. I hung up the phone back at the motel. I put my job search details. I got my degree online, but I had only been a sitcom wife for 10 years. Almost no company would hire me with that level of experience and those qualifications, but after a lot of hard work, one employer eventually consented to interview me the next day after I looked in the mirror at the woman, wearing a professional skirt suit, slim figure and a bright smile after 10 years. As a housewife, I just wore what was easy to wear. I couldn't even imagine wearing tight pants or skirts. I used to go without makeup every day, which made me forget that I wasn't that bad looking. Everyone deserves a break, second chance, and it's never too late. I put on lipstick and left. First I went to Eric's company I picked up the divorce papers and then went to the interview. When I got to the building, Eric's assistant ran over to me. Rachel, Mr. Smith is on a business trip, he said. I looked at her and thought, what trick is Eric pulling this time? Asked what he said, and the assistant nodded a little. He said the divorce papers are at home and he wants you to sign them there. What was wrong with Eric? I waved a cap back to that horrible area. I could hear shouts emanating from there. From inside that I rang the doorbell and it was Susan who answered. She rolled her eyes when she saw me. Aren't you supposed to be getting a divorce from Eric? But why are you back? I smiled and said, I'm just here to sign the divorce papers. Once inside, I realized Eric had lied to me again. He wasn't on a business trip. He was at home when he saw me enter. Eric actually flashed me a rare smile, honestly, after 10 years of marriage. Eric still maintained in good shape, looking much the same as he did when we were dating. He was handsome in that I fell for him back then, because he was so charming. But now his smile didn't do anything for me. Maybe I truly didn't. I didn't love him anymore, so I calmly asked him where the divorce papers were. His face changed and he looked annoyed. "Mike misses you." When you stated Mike, who had been playing with toys on the floor, he glanced up and said, "I don't miss Mom." Like Annie D, I wasn't even mad anymore. It was fine if my only child didn't love me. There was nothing left to hang on to. Eric smacked Mike hard and demanded Mike go inside. Mike immediately started crying and pointing at me. "I hate Mom when she comes back. Dad doesn't like me." Susan hurried over, frowned at me, and hugged Mike, carrying him back to his room. "Eric, where are the divorce papers?" said quietly. Eric gazed at me after what felt like a lifetime. He handed me the documents. I reached for them. He didn't let go. "Do you really want to go this far?" he asked. "I haven't cheated," he said, and I grinned at him. After 10 years, our Eric stopped and said, "Marriage is over, whether you've cheated or not. We're just not right for each other anymore." When I finally let go of the divorce papers and left that house, I felt a sense of serenity flood over me, and I was so happy that I had finally done it. Was ready to take a cab to my interview when a car stopped in front of me. "Rachel, Mommy, Dad, and I came to get you up it." David and Jerry had been together since the coffee shop meeting. Jerry had started calling me Mom every time he saw me. I couldn't help but think that if Mike had been as well-behaved as Jerry, I might have stayed a little longer in that house, but there's no point in wondering about what ifs. Jerry wasn't Mike, and I had already left at. I smiled and got inside the car. "How did you know I was here?" David flashed a gorgeous smile. "I told you I'd always be by your side." Jerry grinned at us and I felt suddenly shy. That day, David took me to my interview and I passed, which was amazing. I rented a place next door. Visiting David's, he told me the proprietor had just gone abroad for work. In my free time, David and Jerry and I would go to the amusement park or shopping, but Eric and the others never came looking for me. We lived in peace for a year, and I never thought I would see them at Jerry's parent-teacher conference when I did. When I got to the classroom, it was already full of people. Suddenly, a weak voice called out to me, "Mom!" I turned around, and when I spotted Mike sitting next to Eric D, the air seemed to freeze. I turned away and didn't look at them again. Jerry patted my palm again and whispered, "Mom, Teacher Lucy wants you." To come up and speak, only then did I realize that the teacher and other parents were all looking at me. I froze. I said hi to everyone and then went up to the platform. "Hello everyone, I'm Jerry's mother and I'm very happy to meet all of you." I could feel a pair of eyes on me from somewhere in the audience when I said I was Jerry's mom. I ignored them, but I couldn't get away from their gaze. After the parent meeting, I took Jerry's hand and was ready to leave. Jerry asked Mom, "Why didn't Dad come?" I looked down and grinned. "Jerry, Daddy is too busy with business." So I came instead. That I patted his head and encouraged him. "Jerry, you did so well. Your craft project came in first place. I'm so proud of you, yay." "Mom, can we have pizza tonight?" I smiled and agreed immediately. I spotted two figures. Eric and Mike were standing in front of us. Mike yelled, "Mommy!" I looked at them, but I didn't want to. He grabbed my hand angrily and asked whose son this man was. I said Eric's, and his face got even darker. "Why didn't I know you had such a big son?" I snorted. "Why do you need to know?" I yanked my hand away from his, about to walk off when Mike grabbed my arm, his voice breaking with cries. "Mama, I'm your son." I turned around, looking at him coldly. "Not your mother. The mother you want is Annie. Don't you love her so much?" Mike burst into tears, rushing towards me to hug me. "Mom, don't go. You're my mom. I missed you so much." I closed my eyes and with a heavy heart pried his hands off me. Eric's voice was hoarse. "Rachel, are you really this cruel?" A wave of inexplicable anguish hit me no matter what. He was still my biological kid, but I couldn't soften my heart. "Eric, we've been divorced. You have been Mike's guardian for a year now, and you have married Annie, the woman you and Mike both like. So much so that you have no right to call me heartless." Eric opened his mouth to say something, but nothing came out that I knew from David that he had married Annie after our divorce just 1 month later. They were married that I didn't get why they were doing this now that Annie wasn't serving them like I had, so they would remember me if that was. This time they were really awful, so I took Jerry's hand and walked away. They didn't try to stop me, but I didn't anticipate Annie to come looking for me. She looked awful. Annie sat down in front of me and smiled. She was still wearing her customary clean white dress. "Rachel, I guess I finally understand you," that I gave a faint smile. "Understand me what for?" Annie took a sip of coffee, and when she spoke again, there was a hint of sadness in her voice. "You were right back then. I seduced Eric and Mike on purpose. I did whatever he wanted, even giving him Rachel. You know how kids that age like adults who let them do whatever they want? So I looked at Annie without saying anything. I already knew all of this, but it didn't matter. There would always be other women, even if Annie wasn't there. Annie gazed at me sheepishly, then began slowly. "I persuaded Mike to talk, and I discovered out that you left abroad, so I sent him home on purpose so he could spend more time with Eric. I didn't think that when I started showing Eric, I was fascinated. He kissed me first, that I glanced at Annie calmly. What's the sense of telling me this? I've already divorced. You married him, and I laughed. Could it be that you're regretting it now that you're married? Isn't what you thought. And to my surprise, Annie choked up and her voice shook with, "Yes, I feel bad about it that I can't stand being married to Eric. He wants me to quit my job and stay home with his mother, Susan. Every time I open my eyes, she's picking at me. Since I can /T take preparing 3 meals a day, I can /T just give up my work and stay home." Annie buried her face in her hands as if she were in so much pain. Before we got married, it wasn't like this. Seeing her like this made me feel a little sorry for her. Young, you can still make better choices. Annie shook her head. "No, I can't divorce. I didn't understand why not." Annie took my hand and her eyes were full with tears because my family is in debt and Eric helped me pay it off after we got married. "Rachel, you must believe I seduced Eric for money, but I really liked him back then. He was so good-looking and kind. He was so nice to individuals that I shook my head. Eric was nice to others, but he didn't show such generosity to everyone." "How much did he help you pay off Annie?" Annie took a long time to answer, but when she did, she said, $500,000. I paused for a moment, then spoke again. "Annie, did he tell you that this money bought your future?" Annie shook her head. "You're married to him now, and he helped you pay off your debts. If there is no contract, you don't have to pay him back. Of course, if you want to pay him back, that doesn't mean you can't get a divorce." I held Annie's hand while I talked about my own situation. Experience Annie marriage doesn't mean you've sold your whole life to Eric. Everyone deserves a second chance. When I got home, David was making dinner. The scent of the tea was so lovely that I put on my slippers and hurried into the kitchen. Turned around and smiled at me. "I will be ready soon." I didn't know how to explain my relationship with David. We were more like very close friends than lovers, and he never told me he liked me in the year we were together. Me that I lived next door to him, and sometimes I'd come over to eat or take care of Jerry together. Jerry called us mom and dad, and I didn't mind. In fact, I was happy compared to being together. I liked this life more. Why does a woman have to be married? Eric was just as kind while I was with him, but everything changed after we got married. I didn't want to gamble with David. What were you thinking about when I got back? I saw David looking at me earnestly, and I smiled weakly and shook my head. I got a call late at night. Eric called. His voice was hoarse. "Rachel, I miss you so much," he said. Startled for a while, "Eric, what's wrong with you? I don't know, I just truly miss you and Mike. He misses you too." I said coldly, "Eric, stop calling me. We both need to move on." There was silence on the other end for a long time. I yelled, "Eric, Eric," for a long time, but I couldn't hear Eric's respiration. A feeble voice broke through. Here I sighed, trying to appear natural as I spoke. "Please let me leave. You could regret I don't question that I'm pleased now. Please quit worrying me." I heard a choked sound. Eric was crying, so I hung up and laid in bed for a long time without being able to sleep. The next day, I went to work with dark circles under my eyes. When I arrived to my desk, Annie wrote me a message, "Rachel, I've divorced him." I stopped for a bit before saying, "Congratulations, Eric seems to miss you a lot, and Mike cries every day asking for you." When Eric's mom talks about you, Mike tells her not to say those things about you, Rachel. You truly can't. I knew what Annie meant, but regrettably it was already too late. Annie, you can't fall for the same trick twice. I sent the message, but Annie didn't reply. After work, I saw Eric. He stood in front of his car with his arms crossed, as if the phone conversation hadn't made things clear enough. Eric rose up straight and wanted to do this face to face as soon as he spotted me. "Rachel D," I took a step back. "Do you need something?" Eric stared at me with a hurt gaze, but sadly I didn't have anything anymore. Sensed any emotional response to him. After a moment he spoke as though anticipating some praise I've already mailed. "My mom went back to her hometown, and I've received a divorce. Mike understands your problems now, so you won't say I couldn't help but giggle when I heard this. Eric, are you going to come back with me?" Eric got angry and grabbed my hand. "Why not?" he said. "Do you really think we can fix things?" Pulled my hand away violently. "I don't love you anymore, that's the fundamental issue," Eric shouted, "but I love you, lettin' not. You say you love me, but you didn't love me when I loved you. Now that you love me, I don't love you anymore. Are just two parallel lines that will never connect. We can't be together." I glanced at Eric with some pity. "Eric, wake up. This is real life, not a book. I can't just forget how much you harmed me in the past, Rachel." "Mom, I didn't notice." But David had brought Jerry with him that moment. I clutched Jerry's hand and grinned, letting go. Eric didn't go mad. I could feel his searing gaze again, as if he wanted to rip me apart. When we reached home, David dragged me onto the... He looked at me earnestly from the balcony, and I could see a trace of pain in his eyes as he questioned, "Do you still love Eric?" I shook my head and answered firmly, "No." David broke into a beautiful smile. "It's been a year, so I think you really have forgotten about him. Rachel, can you give me a chance?" I froze. Had been trying all this time to help me forget Eric. I never believed I'd see this day, but it was David after I bent my head and murmured, "If you change, I'll leave. Life isn't worth living without love." I just wanted to give myself another opportunity. David drew me into his arms. "I won't let you regret it, trust me," he said. I felt like I wanted to. I cried, but I smiled and said, "Okay." That's how we started a life full of hope and beauty. Thank you for watching Rachel's story of heartbreak, courage, and finding herself again. If this moved you, please like the video and subscribe for more real-life stories and emotional journeys. Drop a comment below. What would you have done in Rachel's place? Don't forget to hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. See you in the next video.